let me finish my sentence. The crossroads of the railway transportation system.
Do you have any idea where this plant might go?
Which one?
The main central
Oh, this one?
refinery?
Well, that's why we're in Nebraska. We were actually looking at Bellevue.
Yeah.
There's a place there which we have been looking at.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why we are actually working with the city of Bellevue on the first phase of our project. Next. So, how do we move this without producing a lot of carbon, and at the same time moving it in a way that is more or less at the same cost as moving the product by pipeline? So we came up with a bitumen on rail project or program. That's the reason why we're saying we already know how to address the Keystone impasse, because that's part of our project for the fourth phase, bitumen on rail project. Next. Now, I may need to explain this a little bit more. When they came up with this pipeline from Canada down to the Gulf Coast, their idea was to pipe bitumen, but they can't pipe bitumen. It's too thick. It's like molasses. You can't do that. So what they do is they blend the bitumen with natural gas liquids or natural gas condensate. About 70% bitumen and 30% natural gas condensate or liquids. But they do not have enough of this in Canada. So what happens is that they have to import this liquid. It's like gasoline without the octane. It's liquid. They have to pipe this to Canada, blend it in Canada. They call that diluted bitumen, and pipe that to Louisiana and Texas. That's the idea. So there's what you call diluent cost penalty. Okay? In our case, we're not going to be doing that. We're going to be moving pure bitumen. And the locomotive engines that we're going to be using will be using natural gas instead of diesel. So instead of paying $30 per million BTU, we're going to be paying only about $3 per million BTU. Plus other penalties, we'll most likely be paying something like $4 per million BTU, as opposed to $30. So when we end up with our computation, we're expecting that our costs for moving bitumen will be the same as that of moving it through the pipeline without the associated cost penalties. Now, we say there that this procedure will not pose any environmental risk to the same level as the pipelines. Why? Because if we move bitumen, it's not gonna, if there's a, let's say, derailment or accidents, it's not going to be, the spillage will not be a problem. It will not migrate into the water table. Okay, it can easily be handled. Then, of course, the added advantage that it's not as vulnerable to terrorist attacks or threats. And most of the infrastructures are already in place. We will still need additional infrastructure on the receiving end and the collection places, but it will not be as difficult in terms of getting the permits as compared to the pipelines. Next. So, I was talking about Nebraska, the Nebraska card. Next. As we were saying earlier, it has an easy access to high volume natural gas. In fact, that area that we're looking at, Mike, in Bellevue, there's actually already a large pipeline laid out already for big volume transportation of natural gas, because that place used to be a fertilizer plant producing urea, which you need a lot of natural gas. So it's already there, okay? And this is the other thing. Why Nebraska? It has a very low electricity rates, meaning we have access to low cost electricity. And then we have the strategic proximity to large-scale biomass production. And as I mentioned earlier, it is in the crossroads of the railroad transportation system. All of this contribute to Nebraska as being ideal for this kind of project, which is not available to other states. Next. Well, the benefits of Nebraska are obvious. Okay, but what I'd like to emphasize are the last 2 points: the creation of petrochemical and downstream industries. Those are industries that create high-paying jobs. Today, a new petroleum engineer graduate, its starting salary is between $100,000 to $120,000, fresh from college. That's a petroleum engineer. No experience. Generation and creation of new sectors of agriculture economy based on the production of dedicated energy crops. See, when you produce bio-crude oil, we need a lot of dedicated energy crops. These are switchgrass and similar plants. We use the word dedicated because these are crops that are intentionally farmed for energy production. That's why they are called dedicated energy crops. The nice thing about this is that they can be planted in marginal lands. So unproductive and marginal lands, of which we have plenty, can now be used productively for the farming of dedicated energy crops. That will create a lot of wealth for the farmers. Next. Conclusions. Well, we think that existing technologies using our technology architecture, we think that the dirtiest oil in the world, which is bitumen, can be converted into low carbon footprint conventional oil that will allow us to sell our products to the US government. If we get that bitumen from Canada, it will help ensure US energy independence. Of course, there is a lot of argument against that because they're saying that that bitumen will actually just pass through the United States, and when it reaches the Gulf Coast, it will just be re-exported to the world, just like what's happening right now. Do you know that the United States right now is a net exporter of oil? We are a net exporter of oil, finished products. So we need a lot of that material in the Gulf Coast, which there's a lot of refining capacities, and then we can export those gasoline and diesel overseas, mainly in the Latin and South Americas. Now, we think that our solution will address the polarizing issues between the proponents and the opponents of the Keystone Pipeline. So everybody it's a win-win situation. Lots of jobs will be created, we will have energy independence, and everybody will be happy. Okay, except the owners, of course, of the Keystone Pipeline. But they are a small, part of everybody. Next. So what do we intend to do? I just outlined 2. Next. We have a lot of things to do from here on. But basically, this is a pre-symposium briefing. We would like to have a full-blown symposium on this where we will be able to use the services of experts in this area on petroleum, pipelines, environmentalists, and there will be, some of them will be pro or against the use of bitumen, and it will be lively event. We hope to invite policymakers and planners during the symposium. And right now we are actually, I'm gonna spend about 2 minutes on this one. We're actually initiating some moves to create a consortium to move bitumen, even in a few, maybe within 2 years, from Canada to the Gulf Coast, using what we already know. Here's why. There is an overcapacity of refining bitumen or heavy oil in the South, mainly because the traditional suppliers of heavy oil, mainly Venezuela and Mexico, the supplies there went down by more than 1 million barrels per day. So there's that capacity in the South that's not being used. Meanwhile, when the Keystone Pipeline was when the project was created, there was a lot of confidence that that pipeline will not pose any objection from the United States. So a lot of companies in Canada invested billions of dollars collectively in the production of bitumen. Now that that the pipeline project was rejected, those people there in Canada are doing like this because they cannot just stop the production. So we are thinking, and we have already initiated some talks with some of them. In fact, we are now a member of the Canadian Heavy Oil Association that allowed us to get all their, addresses, emails, telephone numbers. We talked to some of them already, and it's possible that we can create a consortium whereby we will be able to move ahead with the bitumen on rail program to move bitumen to the United States, even if we are not yet implementing the fourth phase of our operation. So it's just a plain movement of bitumen to the south. But that will start the ball rolling for us, and then hopefully we can also start earlier the project in Nebraska, such that we can marry the bitumen with the hydrogen, such that we can create a conventional oil with respect to Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007, so that we can sell our products to the U.S. government. So that's basically what we intend to do in the next few months. And I think we're open for questions. Please.
Freddie, you mentioned that we are a net exporter of oil,
Oh, yeah, petroleum products.
petroleum products. How can
But
that,
basically finished products.
all right, not oil.
Well, those
Well, it's refined.
gasoline came from petroleum.
Yeah,
Yeah, we are a net exporter of petroleum products. You see, because of the higher efficiencies we have reached with our cars, there is no the projected increase in consumption in the United States for diesel and gasoline became flat. Instead of like that, it's flat. But the refining capacities were designed to meet earlier projections that go like this. So now we're actually exporting those gasoline and diesel mainly to the Latin American countries.
light sweet crude is low in sulfur.
Yes.
Is bitumen high in sulfur? Is that what makes it so dirty? It's
No,
high in
that's why I
carbon.
didn't mention, I never mentioned sulfur.
Yes, I know, I noticed that.
Yeah. Sulfur has nothing to do with being dirty. It's carbon dioxide.
Okay.
See? Now, if I may give a little bit more information about that. In the past, before the EPA started to be strict about sulfur content, because when you have high sulfur in your fuel, it gets burnt. And that sulfur becomes sulfur dioxide in the air. And since the air has water, that sulfur dioxide and water becomes sulfuric acid. And then when it gets rain, we get rain.
Acid rain.
That's called acid rain. Yeah, it's dirty, but that's not the definition of bitumen. Yes, bitumen is sulfur, but that definition is more on the carbon intensity rather than the sulfur content. Any other question?
Assuming things go to plan, when could we expect a refinery to open in Bellevue?
The first one, which is our first phase, which is simply the production of green diesel,
Yeah.
green gasoline, and clean petrochemicals like this, And the raw materials are basically animal fat and vegetable oil. That's the first phase. If we get funding, within 2 years we'll be able to build a refinery. It's very, very simple. It's like you're buying a car. I mean, it's there already. There's no magic about it.
What is the
Okay.
cost of a refinery?
This one for about 6,500 barrels per day is about $120 million.
So you'll produce animal fat there too?
No, we will be buying the animal fat because we're not a poultry or we're not a, there's plenty of animal fat in Nebraska.
I understand that, I know there's a lot of biofuel from animal fat. But you would bring in animal fat too to use?
That will be our quote unquote crude oil or what you call feedstock. That's for our first phase.
Okay.
And you are trying to raise through a private placement
Offering.
15 million?
Just to do all the engineering, all the studies, such that we will be able to apply, we will qualify to apply for government guarantees. So that's only for engineering.
Okay.
See, at Biosyn, if you remember their technology architecture, that's what we do. It's a technology architecture. But that architecture is composed of many, many technologies. Those technologies are not ours. We just put them together. It's like an architect trying to design a building.
So you are looking to raise 15 million from the private sector
Yes.
in order to apply
To do
for
all-
government funding.
To do all the engineering so that we can qualify to apply for government funding.
Okay, but there is no guarantee of government funding once the 15 million.
There's no guarantee, but most likely we will. On the other hand, the moment we get that, by the way, let me just add to that, okay? Because I said earlier that there is a program under the Biorefinery Assistance Program that by this year we should have about $400 million available from the government, but I'm not trying to go into politics here, but let me just mention that the Republicans decided to defund that.
65 million.
No, what's remaining from the previous years is only 65. That's what Letary Governor Letary told us. Is that correct, Pat? 65?
Yes.
Okay. So, but there's no more new funding available. So they defunded it. We will still continue, however, we will now go to the private sector. So when you go to the private sector, we still need that $10 to $15 million to do all the engineering.
So when you go to the private sector, there are three things basically an investor wants to know. They want to know what you're going to do with the funds
Right.
you're going to use to do the engineering. What is going to be my return, and when am I going to get it? Would that be a fair statement?
We will, under regulation D 505,
Yes,
we can only entertain sophisticated investors,
accredited.
accredited investors. For those of you who might not know what it is, it's a legal definition where the person concerned is somebody who has at least $250,000 a year income with about $1 million worth of assets. So meaning he knows what he knows where he's going into. Now, a sophisticated investor will not ask a question, what is my return, as if you're going to a bank and say, what is my interest return? The sophisticated investor will normally look at especially in our case, that our project is what you call, the bulk of the money for the construction will come from project financing, not from the investors themselves. We're only going to the to the investors to do the initial studies. But the bulk, let's say for example the first phase, $120 million, we will go to the project financiers that will finance the project of this, which is ordinary in the oil, usual, common in the oil industry. They look at the merits of the project. In our particular instance, the kind of project that we have, the technologies and the constructions are insurable, meaning if it fails, you go to the insurance companies. So the sophisticated investors will look at also the merits of the project, not on the basis of what percentage will I get out of my money. On the other hand, to be specific about your question, we do have what you call, as you probably know, preferred stocks. And we will give 10% return for the preferred stocks. But for the common, we cannot assure a percentage. That's only when you talk about going to the bank and get an interest in your money. But so we will have common shares and preferred shares. For the preferred shares, 10%.
Will the preferred shares be in the PPM, in the private
Yes.
placement?
Yeah.
Okay.
May I just ask you a question? Did you receive a copy of our
Yes.
pre-PPM?
Yes, I did.
That is only a pre-PPM material. There are no financials there.
Right,
Okay?
it was not a PPM, it was a business plan.
Well, it is a redacted version of our PPM.
Yeah.
And a PPM, of course, will involve a business plan as well. But it was meant as an introduction, just like a teaser. But since we would like to use that to as many people as we can, so we decided to do a reduction of our PPM, and we call that a pre-PPM material.
Yes.
Any other question? None? Comments?
One more quick question.
Please.
Assuming the refinery is built a couple of years, do you have any idea how many jobs that could possibly entail? Just even at the refinery itself?
The first phase, which is a small refine. Before I go into, let me just put this in perspective, okay? A normal oil refinery in the United States is between 75,000 barrels per day to 100,000 barrels per day, okay? The big refineries like BP, Shell, Exxon, they can go from 400,000 barrels per day to about 500. The refinery, the first phase that we're trying to put up is only 6,500 barrels per day. It's very small. It's already $120 million to construct. That's only the construction. That kind of a refinery, we will, and it's not labor intensive. It's mainly, so the high-paying jobs, the primary jobs that we will create is between 30 to at the most 50, maybe 40 jobs. But these are high-paying jobs. Of course, there will be subcontractors, suppliers, and so on and so forth. But these are very high-paying jobs, not much. But then when you go into the next phase, third, fourth, so on, there will be a lot of jobs, not only the primary, but also the succeeding. More importantly is the creation of industries. For example, when we need a lot of biocrude requires a lot of biomass. Biomass requires a lot of plants. Plants require a lot of land. So you're talking about creating, businesses, industries in the agricultural sector. Then from there, the petroleum that we'll be creating, then we'll produce other sub-industries. They call that in the oil industry, we call that downstream industries. See, from crude oil you have, let's say, gasoline. But that gasoline is actually, before gasoline, is naphtha. And that naphtha, that looks like this, can be used to create a lot of chemicals, including plastics, even fertilizers, and a lot of other things. See, now, if that particular naphtha was made from biomass, so you can put the word green. Now, to give you an idea about this, one of our raw materials for that jet fuel is called isoparaffins. That isoparaffins, we bought that from Exxon. I'm sorry, from Chevron. Okay, and it's for those of you who I'd like you to think. It's about right now. It's about $5 per gallon. Okay. Now, that came from petroleum. The same exact chemical composition, isoparaffin, you can make that from vegetable oil. Another company called Sasu makes the same exact material, isoparaffins, from vegetable oil in Germany. You know how much they're selling it for? $23 per gallon.
What's it make? What's it make?
Hmm.
What's it make?
Vegetable oil. It could be made from canola oil, coconut oil.
Is it edible?
Hmm?
Is it edible?
No, you don't eat that. Isoparaffin is a chemical.
Okay.
The vegetable oil, yeah, you can fry eggs with it, okay? But
Yeah,
the moment
I-
but that vegetable oil contains carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Now, you can use that as raw material to produce isoparaffin, which is basically hydrogen and carbon. But because it came from vegetable oil, they can command $23 per gallon because they can put the word green.
What are you making it out of?
It's fuel.
Hmm?
It's fuel?
Well, right now we're using it as one of the raw materials for jet fuel. Like this. This is it. This is not isoparaffin. One of the
Well, okay, I
materials.
thought you were
is
talking about, okay, how much byproducts you get off all this stuff you make? Off this,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Very informative.
Mhm.
how much byproducts you get off this?
It depends on what. On the first phase, we don't have any byproduct. We don't have any waste, for that matter.
That's what, I mean, not waste, byproducts, you can always sell for something else,
Our main products will be gasoline,
okay?
diesel, and these are all green.
Okay,
And then we will have chemicals like isoparaffins
Okay.
and normal paraffins. That's
Okay.
it. That's basically it. See, the vegetable oil, the oil that you buy from the virgin oils that you buy from the supermarkets, all we have to do is separate them. That's basically what's happening. Separate them and then combine them in the way that
so basically everything's gonna be fuel.
and
Byproduct is gonna be almost, the byproduct is gonna be fuel.
well, we don't want to call it byproducts because byproducts are like it's your waste. We don't have any byproduct. They're all main products.
Okay,
Gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, and then chemicals.
okay,
petrochemicals.
that's my question. Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
Understanding how much fuel Offutt consumes
Mhm.
in a daily basis, how far out have you projected the growth of the facility? Because the facility you're talking about can't supply Offutt.
Oh, we're not talking about Offutt alone.
No,
We're talking
I
about the
know.
entire military.
I know, but I remember when I was in the service, we'd go alongside an aircraft carrier every 2 days
Mhm.
and give them 1.5 million gallons
Mhm.
of jet fuel.
Yeah.
So the facility we're talking about, the initial facility, is small.
It is small.
But how far out have you projected that?
Well-
How big do you want it to be?
As big as we can afford it, and the kind of support we will be able to get. Let's put it this way: we cannot really supply the entire military. That's crazy. Okay. But what we intend to do is to create a model for others to emulate. Okay. When they do that, what is in it for us? It's like we're showing them. Even right now, for some people who might have technical information, they get this. They go, "Oh, we can do the same thing." The thing is, no, you can't. See, even if we build a refinery and show to them that it can be done, and then they try to do it themselves, they still have to come back to us for what you call technology architecture. However, if they do that and others will do it, then that's the time when collectively we can supply the US military. If I may just add a little bit more information about that because that's kind of important. We spend a lot of money for the strategic petroleum reserves, roughly about $800 million. But do you know that only less than 1% of that can be turned into jet fuel? Okay? And it's not even, and not all the refineries in the United States can refine that crude oil into jet fuel. So actually the United States is vulnerable. What we're trying to do is show to them, in fact we gave them a presentation material on this, just to show them the vulnerability of the United States in case of war, full-blown war. What we're trying to do is, this is actually the fourth phase by using bitumen and turn it into conventional petroleum, is that our primary product, it's not what byproducts, the primary product is military jet fuel. so that we can address that inherent vulnerability based on the present plans under the strategic petroleum reserves. See, 1%, can you imagine, of that is only 1% of that volume is available for conversion to jet fuel. Less than a day's worth of the U.S. requirement for jet fuel in case of an all-out war. So this one, it has military component.
Right.
Talk about energy security, that's where we're actually heading to.
Just to add to that,
Yeah.
he's referring to that there's going to be 4 phases, 4 islands, and the 4th island is going to be dedicated strictly to the development of military fuel.
Yeah. And we can say, and we have plenty of that raw material from Canada, bitumen, but we have to transform that into something that the U.S. military will buy, that will qualify under Section 526 of Energy Independent Security Act of 2007. As it is today, any military fuel that you can produce from bitumen, the United States will not buy under the law. Yes.
If the pipeline is completed, the Keystone Pipeline,
Mhm.
would that have a negative or positive impact of supplies?
We will be able to compete against the pipeline. That's our assertion, okay? Let me just say, based on our initial computations, we can do that. But those assertions are based on certain assumptions that natural gas will remain at this low level. We think it will remain at that level because we have plenty of natural gas in the United States, and that the technology is improving, of extraction is improving every day. So we can actually compete against the pipeline. Well, the pipeline of the long term will be it's stable, it's there all the time, but railway is more flexible. Besides, it's already there. But I think that the pipeline will eventually be approved, but it will take a long time. Meanwhile, these refineries in the south need a lot of bitumen. The producers in Canada are producing a lot of bitumen. There's no transportation system. What is available is from BNSF, but we'll charge them about 5 times the cost. Well, if we can do this within 2 years, we can compete against the cost of an ordinary pipeline, meaning we can move that bitumen to the south at more or less the same cost as the pipeline cost. Okay? So, what time is it?
About 8:30.
Okay, so, any question, Pat, Professor? Or with that, then we adjourn, and please feel free to have some refreshments over there, and thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Feel free to take one of these as a, and smell, but
Put it in your mouth.
smell it, but don't drink it.
Don't drink it?
It won't kill you, but
You won't feel real good.
and to make sure that